This is Kim Meyer, host of Choose to Rise. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hi, everybody. This is Baxter Colburn from Public House Media. From all of us here at PHM, we'd like to thank you for your support and wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
I'm the Greg.
And I am Dave Show.
We host the Greg and Dave Show on Public House Media.
Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out our show, The Greg and Dave Show, where we talk about strange, bizarre, and sometimes just downright quirky news stories that you may not have heard about.
A new show comes out every Wednesday. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes. And hey, thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Beauties and Headcanons, where we're nerdy and you probably are too. This is Emily, and I'm here this week with Danny Domer, who you heard from a couple weeks ago, and Tim Griepentrog, and we're here to talk nerdy to you. Thanks so much to you guys for being here with me today. I'm really excited to talk about this new Star Wars movie that came out. But first, I have a quick question for each of you. You can answer. So what got you into Star Wars to begin with? Let's have Tim go first quick, because we haven't heard from him yet. Hi, Tim.
Yeah, hi. Thanks. I appreciate you having me on here. When did I get into Star Wars? Really, my first Star Wars memory, I had to have been about 7 or 8 years old. And, our family got together in the basement and we were going to watch it. And I figure my parents probably recorded a VHS tape off of TV at some point. And so we started, I'll tell you, this is the only thing I remember. It got to the point in A New Hope where the Jawas had captured R2-D2. And if you remember from the sand crawler, the tube comes down to suck up R2-D2. And it was about that point where the tape started skipping.
No.
And it was done. And that's as far as we were going to go that night. That's all I That's literally all I remember. But it was enough to get me hooked. And I was, I begged my parents to go out and rent the movie so we could get a good copy. So we got that the next night, watched the rest of it. I don't even remember watching the rest of the movie, to be honest with you. I just remember the tape getting stuck at that scene. And I guess that's how I got my start.
Awesome. All right. What about you, Danny?
I was 3 years old. I knew I had to have been because I identified all the characters and as toy figurines when I was 4. And since then, I memorized the original 3 and the prequels, and well into memorizing the 7th one and Rogue One. And I plan on seeing the 8th one at least 6 more times. I saw it twice so far, so it's pretty good.
Oh, that's really good. My daughter already has a lot of the characters memorized too. It's funny. I think we started.
That's how it works.
She was she's 3 right now, 3.5, and she saw The Force Awakens, I think, after it came out, and she watched it with us. But before that, I think she watched the first 6 of them probably sporadically, and so she started to know like R2-D2 and all those guys and stuff. So R2-D2 is her favorite, of course. But yeah, so yeah, I think she was probably 2, maybe even like 1.5 when she first started watching. So we've got a little Star Wars junkie, and it's hilarious. But so when I was younger, when I first started learning about Star Wars, I don't know exactly how old I was, but I remember being in someone's basement. It was like my parents took us to their friend's house, and they had kids too, and so we were going to watch a movie downstairs. And I don't know if we were actually watching Star Wars or Spaceballs, but it was one of the two. And so ever since then, I've always thought that I watched Star Wars, but it might have been Spaceballs, but it might have been A New Hope. I don't know. So to this day, I'm still not sure. But yeah, so that's my background on it. And,
that's awesome.
Just going into like grade school and high school, I didn't watch a ton of it, but later on, when I started to get more involved with my more nerdy friends, they're like, let's all watch Star Wars. Like, my roommate in college was the biggest Star Wars fan, a female Star Wars fan that I had ever met. Like, her email had Amidala in it. I'm like, oh my goodness. So yeah, it's pretty great. And my husband is a huge Star Wars fan as well. So when he found out I hadn't seen the movies all the way through, he's like, we must watch them. So we did. And it was great. Well, let's get into the movie, because that's why we're here, right? First off, just kind of as a whole, the movie itself, The Last Jedi. Let's just go through and talk about likes, dislikes. Like, did we think it was a good movie overall? Was it lacking in anything? And that sort of thing. Personally, I thought it was pretty enjoyable overall. It was well put together, I think. And there was one thing that made me nervous right off the bat, which was there was a little bit of humor at the beginning with Poe, I think it was. And I'm like, uh-oh, is this going to be like like Thor Ragnarok, where everything is hilarious? And it's a Star Wars movie. Is that how this is going to be? And as I continued watching, I'm like, okay, this is better. This is good. Everything is well placed and not too funny. It's still Star Warsy enough to me. So like that was good.
Yeah, it's funny you talked about the humor right at the beginning, because that is one thing I had heard, before I even went there was a good amount of humor in it, and I agree too. As the movie wore on, there was enough of it, but not too much. I think that one of the good things about Star Wars is that it doesn't take itself too seriously all of the time. We're meant to have fun, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel sometimes that when Star Wars isn't at its best, it takes itself too seriously or goes too far to the other end and is too goofy. So yeah, exactly. I felt they struck a pretty good balance there. Other thoughts about it, it was just typical Star Wars in so many ways. It was just a lot of action. I felt like the pacing of the movie overall was really good. It kept going from climactic moment from one scene to the next, so it kept us on our toes. And here's the thing too, I felt rather weird. I felt strange at several points in the movie, and I think over time this is something that I'll get more used to. Just a few things I wasn't expecting, and that made me kind of scratch my head. But I guess that's not totally uncommon for things to just, strange aliens or creatures that we're not used to seeing yet, that we see for the first time and are just, that's really interesting.
Like, the whole universe of Star Wars is something that we've never experienced. So who knows what's out there, And the writers of the movies have rights to show us whatever they want to from there. So
I felt like too that the movie took on more than I was expecting it to as well. And where normally you see a story arc and it, I felt like Last Jedi took on an extra one or two huge scenes where at any point, maybe 2/3 the way through the movie, they could have ended it and we would have still had a really good movie, but they chose to take on more and more. And it just,
exactly,
who's not going to take more dessert at that point? So,
yeah. Well, what do you think, Danny?
Well, on a 10-point scale, I rate it 3,720 to 1 as the odds of CPO were. I appreciated it for its action that it had. The pacing was good. It felt like it dragged on a little bit with the Rebel cruiser, but like they did a good job inserting enough action in between all the sequences. That I appreciated the humor, because the end of The Force Awakens really was dark. It was a dark movie overall, and they needed to kind of center it a little bit more, because it's the first Star Wars movie you haven't seen or you've seen in 30 years, or 10 years, I guess, by our reckoning, and it was completely dark. So they had to recenter it to kind of be more humorous to get more people to come in and see it. Yeah. I wish they did explain more characters than they did. But overall, definitely well worth watching multiple times. There
are references to the other Star Wars movies, obviously, because it's part of a series. But overall, as a movie, it was really enjoyable. And there were maybe a couple of side plots that personally I felt a little fumbled. It just kind of like happened, and it maybe, I don't know what it was exactly. It seemed like something, it worked out a little bit too easily for them, but then like didn't. But and I don't know necessarily why that had to be part of the plot, but it worked out in the end. I guess they were able to figure out the scenario. But other than that, like, the whole thing was just really, really good, and a lot of good Star Wars-ness, like action and emotion, and a lot of that good stuff.
Yeah, I saw a lot of ties right into Episode 3 and Episode 6, like with Luke referencing Darth Sidious and the height of the Jedi, and you brought your father back. You can do the same thing. I really appreciated referencing the other movies just because I've seen them so many times.
Yeah, exactly. So my husband and I saw it on Sunday night, and as we were driving home from it, he pointed out, he's like, the beginning script scroll at the very beginning of the movie, how all Star Wars movies begin, it started off with it was describing, and I'm like, this looks like it could have been used for a different Star Wars movie too, because it was like exactly the same scenario that happened in a different movie. So I'm like, oh, well, it is kind of the same scenario, but it happens a lot, like it gets found out, and then things happen, and we just gotta see how the story unfolds after that. Because I guess, the beginning of a story, the setting, the background of where we are now, all of a sudden, that could play out in any direction. And so that's more interesting than how things start. It's not necessarily about where we start, but how things pan out afterward. So Tim, what do you think about other connections to the Star Wars saga?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into spoilers at this point, but there's definitely a point in there where I'll just say this. It felt at one point in particular that maybe some of the connection was a little forced. Okay. Great scene nonetheless, but maybe they're trying to, fall back onto our emotions of how much we loved the prior series. But I didn't mind that. I think my biggest thing, how does this movie relate to the one that's coming in 2 years from now? And that's the biggest question in my mind, is because, we see where we're at right now. And really, in my mind, this movie, since it did take on more than I was expecting, my mind goes to, well, what is there left to this story that we have yet to see? Yeah. And to go along with that, is J.J. Abrams going to be as willing to step outside the box as Rian Johnson was in this current movie? That'll be interesting for me to see. I guess my main concern, or the thing I like the least about the Force Awakens, and I love the movie, but it felt really repackaged of the old Star Wars. And I think in some ways that was the intent, and it succeeded in getting everybody back on the bandwagon. But it felt safe in a lot of ways. This movie definitely was not safe, and it made a lot of decisions that we weren't expecting. Yeah. And I'm just really excited to see if the final chapter in this trilogy continues that tradition of stepping outside the box and surprising us at so many turns, or if it kind of conforms more into a more scripted finale. Yeah, no, that's something I totally enjoyed about this one, was that there were some risks that were taken, and we were surprised in several places where you didn't expect to be surprised. I'm like, oh my goodness, that happened. All right. Well, that was, now what? Like, because, and maybe we'll mention this in the spoiler portion of the episode, and maybe we'll mention the details of it, but there was definitely a scene where I'm like, I really hope that this is what's happening right now. And I was like, whoa, no way, that's awesome. So yeah, I think we were all having that same reaction at that. Yeah, so that's really, really cool.
Awesome. I think we'd also get a really good insight into, and maybe this is more of a perplexing insight than anything, like where Kylo Ren is as like a Force user, as a leader, and as a person himself, because we see it's interesting to see him in this movie.
How so, would you say?
Well, because when he interacts with Rey, they have their own interactions, and on the one hand, he feels like he's coming to conclusions, but on the other hand, it feels like he's getting himself more confused or more conflicted. And so as we go through the interplay between him and Rey, and then him and Snoke, or him and other characters, it's difficult to see where his intentions truly are. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like that's what I mean. And I don't want to give away spoilers at this point, so I want to, yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, so as I've been kind of alluding to it, up to this point in this episode, we have not given out any big spoilers. We've maybe alluded to some things that happen and some things that, that are to come, but anything major. So if you have not seen the movie yet, you've been safe so far. However, if you do not want to find out any spoilers, this is the place to stop listening. Okay. So right now is the cutoff point. If you want to save the spoilers for later, come back to this episode later on and listen to the rest of it so that you can get all of our thoughts on the spoiler related material from The Last Jedi. But, if you have seen the movie and you're ready for all that, keep listening, because here we go. We are going into spoiler land. All right. So, Danny and Tim, here's my question for you. What was the biggest shocker from the movie? We'll go with Danny first and then Tim.
I really liked the addition of Yoda. I really appreciated how he was in there. He knocked Luke around a couple times, like, verbally, of course, but enough to get him like, oh, hey, you should get back on track here. I really appreciated his thoughts on the Jedi Order and where they're going to be going in the future. Oh
yeah, yes.
That was my favorite part of that movie, actually. But what also surprised me was Luke's bitterness and how withdrawn he was from everything. I mean, there was a shot of his X-wing that he just kind of landed in water and left it to rust and rot and everything, and that he refused to participate and do anything just kind of shocked me, because that's not how the expanded universe of Skywalker was. Not until the end, anyway.
Hey, that's a good point. I'll just jump in here. Luke. That's probably the biggest shocker of all was how he. Wow. he just totally. There was no plan to come back with him. He had decided so firmly that the ways of the Jedi were more or less harmful in the end, as they were helpful, and that he was as much of a culprit in all of that as anyone else. And it was good to see him maybe come to the point when he saw Rey's potential that maybe she was worth investing a little bit of time with. But as he said, to not necessarily raise her up as a Jedi, but to show her the faults of the Jedi so that she could avoid those same faults. It was funny. I was watching here before we started some interviews from Mark Hamill about his reaction to what his character would be doing in the movie, and by all accounts he wasn't real pleased with it. I think back to the preview when Luke says this is not going to go the way you think, and it those words could apply to the whole movie, really, and to also our expectations for the movie and our expectations of what these characters are doing and thinking. That was basically the first of so many curveballs that we were thrown throughout the entire movie. So I like that you brought that up. I'd say my biggest shocker is it's maybe a tie between the fact that Snoke was killed off in this movie, number one, and number two, the fact that Princess Leia, or General Leia at this point, has force powers that she's using. Maybe the two most shocking scenes to me in the entire movie were those two. With Snoke, I just, I don't know about anyone else. It was just, you expect that almighty character to last, as Emperor Palpatine did, until the end of the final act of the trilogy. But we're really thrown for a loop there when Kylo Ren decided to end things and take over the whole the movement on his own. And then with Leia, I don't know about you, Danny. I just thought that was just the strangest scene ever. She was blown up on the bridge, and then she's floating out in space, and she comes to and somehow through the Force just floats back to the ship. That was shocking to me. I'm going to need a little time to take that in and to accept that that's part of Star Wars. Just such a departure from what we've known.
Well, if I might say, well, I was talking to a coworker of mine who saw it the day after, or the same day that I did, and I talked to him the day after, and he said it was evidence of Leia being trained a little bit by Luke in the early days. She used the Force, and if you pay attention, I'm going to explain this in movie terms because it makes the most sense to me, and I want to accept it for what it is. As it's weird, but I think it's awesome at the same time. If you can use the Force to drag down Star Destroyers, and there's lots of evidence in the expanded universe of Jedi performing outrageous tricks and stuff to go along with it, that if she can put herself into some sort of hibernation trance and pull herself to the ship, I mean, she's using the Force there to survive, however briefly it was in space. Yeah, and the Jedi in the expanded universe, I feel like that was a nod to on that as probably expanded universe fans a little bit.
One thing, going back to my overall maybe summary of this movie, is that it's expanding upon our understanding of what Star Wars is, and really that's something that's really commendable, because there's probably a lot of people out there who don't like certain things about this movie because it's not like what we know to be Star Wars, right? There's a group of people who think that way, and then there's people like me who, when we watched The Force Awakens, thought there was more there that could have been done. So, where do you strike that balance? I don't, envy people making these movies, because that's a hard line to try to bridge, between those two camps. But I'm okay with it. It's a little shocking to see at first, but it expands the universe of our understanding, and I love seeing Leia with Force powers. I mean, we knew she had them, and we never got to see it before. So what a great way to bring that in.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it also kind of, at the end of The Force Awakens, when Han died, I guess not the very end, but when Han died in The Force Awakens, they go to a shot of Leia, and she just has this sinking sensation, and that she knows he died. And that's a kind of a nod to her Force sensitivity too, which is kind of awesome, because I heard before I saw The Force Awakens that Leia was sensitive to the Force too, and so I was wondering how strong she was or how much training she had, and then seeing her in The Last Jedi, I'm like, okay, obviously she's using the Force right now, because I don't know of any normal human that does that out in the middle of space after you just got blasted from the spacecraft. So that was really cool, but it cinematically, it just looked weird. She's just kind of like this frozen, stiff, floating person, and I don't know how else they would have done it, but it just looked really strange. And I know it's feasible through the Force, but it's just, I don't know exactly what was weird about it. It just looked odd to me.
No, I agree with you on that. we can dig into this if we want to, but the issue of, what happens with General Leia in the final Star Wars movie, now that she's survived through The Last Jedi, is going to be a real point of interest for all of us. There were a couple chances here with that scene being maybe the foremost of all, that they had the opportunity there to have her die, and they chose not to.
Mm-hmm.
To see her floating out there in space, all of us, the first time we saw it, we thought, is this it? And had that been the way she went out, it would have been, it was really touching the way it was. But that could have been a really nice way to do it too. But they chose to bring her back. Mm-hmm. Another opportunity would have been for her to be the one to stay in the cruiser and to slam it through Snoke's ship. And they didn't take that.
Which is a really cool thing they did too. That was really cool that they did that.
That was awesome. Absolutely.
Yeah, that was awesome.
So I'm really,
mm-hmm.
I'm really excited to see what their solution is here. At the end in the caves, she basically, in essence, hands the reins of the Resistance over to Poe.
Right.
She says, "Why are you looking at me?"
Right. Like he's the one with the plan. Follow him. He's got it now.
Right.
But that should by no means mean that we don't see her in any way in the next movie.
No, exactly.
It would be really strange if we wouldn't. So
yeah, there would have
I'm
to
really
be
curious.
some kind of like connecting explanation.
Well, my feeling is that they cut out a lot of the shots that they had with her for this movie after she passed away because they were not fully completed. And I feel like they're going to insert something into the next one so that they can explain what happened.
Yeah, that might help for sure.
They weren't sure if they were going to get this movie out on time because she passed away so suddenly last year.
So you're saying because after she passed away, when they were editing the movie, they took some scenes out that she was in. Interesting.
That's the way I understood it. They took out a lot of her scenes because they were not fully completed in post-production. Like they were still left unedited and such.
Interesting.
So I feel like they would have had to rearrange some of that for the next movie.
And I was going to say, for one of my biggest surprises, biggest shockers in here, Luke was in it way more than I thought he was going to be. Like, for some reason, I just had this gut feeling that he was going to be in maybe the first 45 minutes of the movie, have a little interaction with Rey and then say, sorry, I can't help you, and then just be done. But he was in, like, the whole thing almost. I'm like, that's awesome. And then the fight scene with Kylo was just fantastic.
Yes, that was great.
That was so cool. And, the whole time we think he's actually there fighting on the planet, and then to find out that he's still on his remote island, like on a completely different planet, sending his like force persona. I don't know if there's a term for that, Danny, maybe you do. But like he's projecting himself onto the planet, matching move for move what Kylo's doing, and managing on purpose to not ever get touched so that Kylo didn't know he wasn't really there. Like, that's amazing.
It did blow me away. I don't remember any mention of it in any other Star Wars canon or X-canon, but I'm still new to the revised canon stuff. That last fight scene there, though, gave me goosebumps because he blast him, just put everything you got. Did you think you got him? I don't know if you actually did.
I should hope you did, but nope. Oh, that was great. So good. You guys already mentioned this too with Yoda and how he was like, it's time for the Jedi Order to be gone. Like, let me take care of that for you. I'll just, set that whole tree on fire. We're good.
Okay.
Like that's fine.
And not to interrupt you, but in connection to that, if you watch it again, or when you watch it again, pay attention to Rey in the Millennium Falcon.
I already noticed that.
She puts the books away.
Yep.
Yeah, she puts the books away. I didn't see it the first time. I saw it the second time, and I was just like, "Holy crap!" She had the books.
So I noticed that, like, right towards the end, when everybody was on the Falcon, and Finn was helping Rose onto the bed and closed the drawer. That's when I saw the books. I'm like, "Oh, she's got them."
Now
so they're not really gone, but it's not like, I mean, she has a better understanding, I think, of what the Force really is.
Let me ask a question here. Did Luke know that she took the books?
I don't think so.
And
personally,
and then to go with that, did Yoda know that she took the books and was trying to keep that fact from Luke?
That's a very good question.
I think that was the case there. I really do.
Yoda knew?
I think.
That is a very good question, because I mean, once a Jedi passes on, like, they're kind of like they see all, it seems like, and I don't know if that's exactly how it rolls like that, but it seems to me that once they've become one with the Force, or however it's stated, like, you know, Yoda passed on, and he's like, okay, now I kind of see how all these things panned out, and, you know, he has that full knowledge, it almost seems like.
Well, the only a few Jedi could do what Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Anakin did.
True.
And they were introduced to it by Qui-Gon, and Qui-Gon couldn't fully do what the other Jedi did. Only his voice and his presence carried, but not the full essence of himself.
Okay.
So I feel like Luke is going to have he might have a bit of that, because he obviously has been in contact with Yoda.
Right.
But not every Jedi has the ability to just become one with the Force in the same way the other Jedi, those few Jedi did.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So that's a specific skill.
Yeah. Sure. So,
not to be nitpicky.
Oh no, that's fine, because Yoda was the one we were talking about, and he did that. So, yeah, no, that makes sense though, because the way Luke described the Force is the energy between everything that kind of connects us all together. And so if you become one with that, then you're kind of connected to everything.
Right. So
that is a really good point, though. Yoda, maybe he knew that Rey took the books, and he was trying to throw Luke off on that. But then, so moving on to the theories based on this that we kind of already discussed a little bit, but I have something else I want to add. Like, I think after this, that, like, Force users are going to be more like what's called gray Jedi, or I don't even know if they'd be called Jedi exactly, but they'd be gray Force users, so to say. You know, less of the solely light side and solely dark side, but more of a, let's appropriately use the Force to make sure that everything is in balance. I think that's kind of what Rey wants to be, as opposed to a strictly light side Jedi. And it kind of, the way that she started off using the Force was through her emotions, which is what a dark side Jedi would do. But she also has enough like mental strength to use it with control. And that's what a light side Jedi would do. So I think she's going to end up being like a gray, which I love, makes me happy. I'm Team Gray Jedi, hashtag Team Gray Jedi. I don't know if that's what you'd actually call it, but the gray, the middle of the Force, that's where I feel like I would be if I were a Force user. So I think that's going to be more of a prominent thing. So I feel like that is more balanced. That's kind of that's what Luke was trying to get at with his disposing of the Jedi Order sort of thing, was he realized that the flaw was there was no balance.
Yeah, I can definitely see it going that way. And you see with Kylo at the end, and by the way, I'm still interested in people's thoughts on Snoke going bust this movie.
Yeah.
But afterwards, Kylo Ren he's talking to Rey, and you can see him maybe being a gray Sith.
Yeah.
He said he wants to forget the Jedi, forget the Sith, forget the Resistance, forget the First Order. Let's just rule the galaxy.
Yeah.
And his being, tinged towards using, his anger and hatred. It'll be interesting. maybe we could talk about the very last scene for a second, because it shows the slave kid, the broom boy, summoning the broom. Mm-hmm. I'd be curious if we were going to go down the gray Jedi, gray Sith path. Then what does that mean for the kids and the future Force users? Because those kids are clearly drawn to the Resistance.
Yeah,
right?
They were.
So I don't know. I think it could go either way. I think Rey looks at it and sees, I need to oppose evil, and that's typically done from the light side of the Force exclusively. So it's an unanswered question. So
that is definitely
we'll have to see
true.
where that goes.
Well, I approach that with what do they do? They signed on to make more episodes, like 10, 11, and 12. And so how are they going to reconcile killing off all the Sith and all the Jedi and all the Force users and still have more movies to make them? Because that's what makes
that's what it's about.
Of all the movies hold together. And I feel like with Rey and Kylo Ren being the last two Force users in the galaxy at this point, they might have to they might train people up in their respective schools again, and they might be balanced, but they might you could be a light-sided person but still be on the side of evil. You can be a dark-sided person on the side of good.
That is interesting.
I wonder if they're going to have.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it with the whole grayness of something too. And I think another thing that Luke was trying to point out to Rey was that the Force shouldn't just be for like the religious elite of the Jedi. The Force can be used by anybody who wants to access it. And I think he had kind of a point there when he was trying to get Rey to understand what the Force truly is.
Did he say that?
Well, not necessarily word for word, but to me, that's what his implication was that the Force shouldn't be specifically only used by I guess, if we wanted to make an analogy, the Jedi were like kind of the priests or the monks of their age, more like monks, I guess. And I think he'd wanted to get rid of the only monks can use the Force, and more of the common people can use the Force kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. But you have to be Force sensitive at the same time.
Well, right, yeah, that's the thing is finding the Force sensitive people too, and making sure that everyone has a better understanding of it, though. So, but yeah, do we have any final thoughts on projecting outward into the Star Wars universe here?
I think there's going to be a major battle. While they got their word out to all their allies and they got no response at the time, I feel like those allies are going to come together, and there's going to be one major... There's always a major space battle in every Star Wars trilogy set. So I feel like that's going to happen in the next one, too.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts from you, Tim?
Yeah, just to go along with that, to echo back to what I've said before here, is that this movie took on so much.
Yeah.
That really the only thing left is a major space battle and a 2-hour fight between Rey and Kylo, right?
That's what it seems like. No, I wouldn't be mad about that at all.
But yeah, like I said, it'll be interesting to see where JJ goes with this, because it seems very simple what's left to the story at this point, and you have to imagine they'll be adding more meat onto this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But what will that be? At this point, we don't know of any more Death Stars to blow up,
right?
So what will the space battle revolve around?
Mm-hmm.
And then if it's really just Rey versus Kylo, that's going to be the only thing that truly matters. And then, if one is completely defeated, then how does that leave the galaxy?
Right. Yep. Where do the Force users go from there? Because whoever, if one is defeated, then whoever's left standing has to decide what to do.
Do any of you see a scenario where Kylo wins?
I personally still see a lot of inner conflict in Kylo. I still feel like he hasn't decided fully to be dark side. He still feels drawn to the light side. And so to me, I could see him switching, kind of like how Anakin / Darth Vader flipped back toward the end and became good, went back to the light side. I feel like he could do that. And in that case, maybe he would. But other than that, I don't really.
No, anything's possible. But the biggest thing I got from this movie was when Rey and Kylo were both, fighting for the lightsaber in midair. Well, just prior to that, when basically Kylo was propositioning Rey to join him in his quest to rule the galaxy. When she didn't take him up on the offer, that's some major scorned lover going on right there.
Yeah.
I'm not. If she hadn't done that, I don't know what is driving him to the dark side at that point. But since she does that, he can renew his hatred once again. So, who knows? Who knows? One interesting thing too, I just want to mention is that in the scene where Kylo Ren's in his TIE fighter, and he had the opportunity to kill his mom, but chose not to. Wouldn't it have been interesting if the shot had actually killed her?
That's what I was expecting.
But he decides not to kill his mom, and then she dies anyway. That would be a major catalyst for him to flip sides to the light.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was expecting to happen.
At this point, right? And at this point, with very limited or no Leia in the last movie, excuse me, I'm not sure what opportunity he's going to really have to come back over.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I don't know what scenario there would be for him to come over. I just know I left the movie feeling like he was still on the fence in some capacity. But other than that, yeah, I mean, for the most part, he does seem mostly dark side too. I mean, obviously, but yeah, that to me, yeah.
He's dark side at the end of the movie, but where is his anger mostly directed toward? It's directed toward Luke.
True. And
with Luke gone, he might actually go to the planet and find out that Luke is dead.
Yeah.
And his anger might subside a little bit, but he's still got that dark tendencies. Even Anakin. When he committed the atrocity of helping to kill Mace Windu, realized, what have I done?
Yeah.
And then, he still had that conflict going on too. So I feel like that the conflict is going to be ever a part of his character.
Yep, that is definitely a possibility too. And maybe he will never officially resolve and just end up being dark side because that's predominant for him. So, yeah. But there's definitely a lot to talk about with this movie, especially spitballing about where things are going to go, because like you said, Tim, it seems like there's a clear-cut path, but at the same time, there's a lot of different there's a lot of flesh that could get put onto this. And so, we don't know all the details for sure, obviously. And I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see what they do with it. I'm really excited.
Absolutely. And, I think we'll all be waiting to see if Snoke comes back with robot
legs. I don't know. We'll find out.
Anything can happen.
True. Is Snoke really dead? I mean, he laid there on the ground pretty convincingly, but
Sure. So did Darth Maul, and we know what happened.
Yep.
Right.
So,
or did it?
All right, indeed. Well, thank you so much for being on the show with me today, you guys. I so appreciate you sharing your Star Wars love and Star Wars knowledge with all of us. And all the listeners appreciate you guys too. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. So if you guys, listeners, if you enjoyed The Last Jedi, or maybe if you didn't, let us know on the Facebook page, Beauties and Headcanons, or on our Twitter at beauties_canons, or on our Tumblr, we've got Beauties and Headcanons, just all one word there. You can tune in this week, Friday, as well, for a Doctor Who Christmas special ranking. And that is going to be a lot of fun. I have some special guest hosts for that episode too. Subscribe on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and on iTunes. Also on a couple other new platforms as well. If you're not sure what those are, check our Facebook page. We'd also love it if you guys could give us a review and a rating so that we can keep improving on our episodes as time goes on. Also, as always, a big, huge thank you to Public House Media for making this show possible. Go ahead and check them out on Facebook or on Twitter at the PH Media, or on their website at thephmedia.com to stay up to date on this podcast and on the rest of the network, because they're growing all the time. All right, I am Emily, and thanks for getting nerdy with us on Beauties and Headcanons.